back in November of 1966 that Paul McCartney died. Well, that's what some people believe anyway, thanks to the rumor started by somebody as far back as 1966. We covered most of that in the last installment of the Paul McCartney rumors. This time around, I'm going to tell you the clues that were found in the album covers, starting with the Sgt. Pepper album. The cover was supposed to depict a funeral, Paul's funeral. And if you look closely towards the bottom, it looks like an open grave with yellow flowers in the shape of a bass guitar that looks like it spells out the word Paul with a question mark after it. Just above the word Beatles, next to the S, looks like a little model car that fell over a cliff and caught fire, supposedly symbolizing Paul's car accident he was supposed to be in back in November of 1966. That's when he was supposed to have died. For the bass drum that says Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, if you put a mirror cutting through the words Lonely Hearts right in the middle, the word hearts, when reflected in the mirror, looks like it says, he die. As far as the Beatles themselves, Paul is seen holding a black instrument, supposedly a sign of death. Of course it is. And above his head is a raised hand, supposedly a blessing that a priest would give over a dead person. And all the people behind the Beatles are supposed to be the attendees of Paul's funeral. Now, on the inside of the cover, you see the four Beatles with the yellow background. Paul's wearing his blue uniform. And on the sleeve, there's a patch. It says OPD, officially pronounced dead. No, it's actually OPP. It actually stands for Ontario Provincial Police. It's not a D at the end, it's a P. And continuing on to the back cover, the four Beatles are seen standing there, Paul with his back turned. Why? Well, he's supposed to be dead, so they had to have somebody stand in for him for the back cover. No, that's just the way he posed for the cover, because there are other photos taken in that photo session that shows Paul is alive and well. And George looks like he's pointing to Paul with his right hand, but he's not. He's just resting his index finger on the button on his shirt. He's not pointing at Paul. The next album had quite a few clues on it, the Magical Mystery Tour album. The word Beatles is spelled out in stars, and they said if you held it upside down, it spelled out a phone number, 537-1438. Some people claim they called it, and somebody on the other end said, "You're getting warmer," and hangs up on them. The Beatle on the cover, dressed in black as a walrus, well, it looks like it's Paul, even though John said it was him. It sure looks like Paul. And the walrus is supposed to be a symbol of death. In the inside booklet of Magical Mystery Tour, there's a picture of the four Beatles doing their little dance number. All the Beatles have red flowers on their lapel, all except Paul, who wears a black one, another sign of death. He said later, well, they ran out of red ones. Also in the booklet, there's a picture of Paul in a military uniform, and in front of him is a little banner that says, I was. You was what? You was alive once? Elsewhere in the booklet is another picture, a black and white photo, where you can see the four Beatles dressed in their wizard costumes, walking in a crowd. Oh, but look, there's another raised hand above Paul's head. Is that another blessing? And on the back of the booklet, that shows the cast members and crew members all saying hi and waving and smiling at the camera. But in the back, there's Paul with his arms upraised and another hand above his head, another blessing. By gosh, he must be dead. As far as the White Album is concerned, way at the top of the poster is a picture of Paul in a bathtub. To us, looks like he's just washing his hair. But to others, he said, oh, looks like Paul's dead, floating in water. No, he was just washing his hair. That's all that was. And then there's the Yellow Submarine soundtrack album. On the cover, look, I saw four cartoon Beatles, and Paul has another hand over his head. Oh, another blessing. How many clues do we need to prove he's dead? Well, we do need more. On the cover of Abbey Road, there are the four Beatles walking across the road. John dressed in white as the priest, Ringo dressed as the undertaker, Paul dressed as the corpse, barefoot with a cigarette and his eyes closed, and out of step with the others, and George in the back in his blue jeans dressed as a gravedigger. The white Volkswagen over to the left, the license plate says 28 if. Oh, like Paul would have been 28 if he'd been alive. Well, he was actually 27 at the time. And it looks like they're walking away from a cemetery if you look really close. On the back of Abbey Road, if you look between the word Beatles and the person walking by in a blue dress, the shadows make it look like a warped skull. And also the word Beatles has a crack in it. It has a crack in the S, which means There's an imperfection somewhere within the group, right? The album that came out after Abbey Road was released in America, not in England. It was called the Hey Jude album, or the Beatles Again album. And there is something on the cover that some people think was a clue to the death of Paul. There's no words on the front at all. No band name, no album name, no nothing. No label name. But at the top is a small black and white photo of the Beatles with Paul looking up in the sky. Or is he looking towards heaven, waiting for the angels to take him away? But people started digging even back farther looking for clues about Paul being dead, even before he was supposed to have died, which is ridiculous. In the Revolver album that came out before Sgt. Pepper, you see caricatures of the four Beatles. You see John, Ringo, and George all full-faced, all except Paul. You only see his profile looking away from the camera, while the others are full-faced. On the Rubber Soul album that came out before Revolver, you've seen the photo where the Beatles look like they're all a little bit out of shape. The photo's kind of bent. That doesn't mean much, but some people thought the photo looked like the Beatles were looking down into a coffin. And on the back of Rubber Soul, you see 8 pictures of the Beatles, 2 of each one. John, Ringo, and George, you see them looking at the camera, except Paul. The 2 pictures of Paul, he's looking away from the camera. Gosh, what does that mean? And he's smoking a cigarette. Oh, my goodness. That must mean he's dead. And the Beatles' Yesterday and Today album, the cover that everybody knows, has John, George, and Ringo standing around a trunk that Paul is sitting in. Some people think that's not supposed to be a trunk. That's supposed to be a coffin. That means Paul's dead. He's sitting in a coffin. No, it's just a trunk. But the original cover showed John, George, Paul, and Ringo sitting in butcher smocks covered in bloody meat, holding headless dolls with cigarette burns in them, with false teeth and eyeballs that they got at a slaughterhouse. That's supposed to mean that Paul was dismembered in that car accident? No, it was just supposed to be an avant-garde photo shoot. Nothing to that at all. And finally, some people went as far back as the Help album in 1965. Was help supposedly the last word Paul said when he was in that car crash? On the inside of the cover of the Help album, you see the Beatles getting ready to go skiing. They have their skis on, and they have a big scarf wrapped around their necks. And Ringo, George, and John all have hats on, all except Paul, who doesn't have a hat on. Well, gosh, they really don't bury people with their hats on, do they? And also, on the bottom, there's another picture of the 4 Beatles with Ringo, George, and John all turning their heads, looking at Paul, who's looking straight into the camera and winking. He says, yeah, I'm dead, all right. Anyway, those are the clues that supposedly started with the Sgt. Pepper album, and people just wanted to keep it going by digging back even farther, a year or 2 before Paul's rumored death. There are still people out there who totally believe he really is gone. I'm not going to tell you what I think.